we've understood. You see, there's the letter of the law, which is important, but then there's also the spirit of the law. And the spirit of the law is that you're responsible for actually more than just your actions. And I really hope that you're ready today, because Jesus is going to address two commandments in order to make sure that we really recognize there are deeper repercussions than most people would like to admit. And so today I'm just going to say, Jesus, I think, provides us with three significant points to ponder, some things we really get a chew on in our minds. And what we quickly discover is that what's behind the commands not to murder or to commit adultery are the significant issues of anger and lust. Aren't you glad you came to church today? Anger and lust. And there are so many different aspects of these topics that really we could honestly take weeks to be able to deal with. And so what I'm going to try to focus on today is what I think Jesus is trying to address concerning these two important issues, which of course is what we've been saying, the heart of the matter is a matter of our hearts. And so what's the first point Jesus wants us to ponder today? I think it would be this: the unexpected consequences of our anger. Unexpected consequences of our anger. And so Jesus jumps right in verse 21. He says, "You've heard that it was said to the people long ago, 'You shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment.'" And people are like, "Yep, we got that." But then Jesus says, "But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment." Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, "Raka," is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, "You fool," will be in danger of the fire of hell. And then he says, "Therefore, if you're offering your gift at the altar and they remember that your brother or sister has something against you, you're not in a good relationship, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them. Then you can come and offer your gift." Now, I think this would be a good time to remind you of something that I often have to remind myself of when I read or when I hear the words of Jesus. And that is that, honestly, Jesus, he's genius. He is genius. And it's not just what he says, when he says things that are noteworthy or are memorable. It's actually the way he's going to walk us through this and develop this idea. Honestly, I think it's genius. And so he starts with murder, which everyone knows, of course, is wrong. But then did you notice he gives three examples combined with three consequences that I would think leave us kind of scratching our heads just a little bit. I mean, because first of all, he equates anger with murder, almost the same type of punishment. And then he mentions a very simple insult, raka, which is Aramaic, and it literally means empty. It's kind of like calling someone a non-entity or a nobody, which Jesus said is worth going to court over. And then there's a very common insult, calling someone a fool. And the Greek word here is the word moros, from which we get the word moron from. And so it's basically calling someone an idiot. Now, you can't live in Colorado Springs and drive on the streets without thinking that thought, at least sometime, right? Am I right? So we're hitting most people there. Well, that behavior, Jesus says, puts you in the danger of the fire of hell. Now, I hope you notice really what he's doing here. As the responses get less in intensity, the punishment actually goes higher up in consequence. Now, I really want you to know, I don't think Jesus is saying that just because you call someone a fool or an idiot, you're going to hell. And we're all saying, because I've said it or thought it. He's definitely not saying that calling someone a fool is worse than murdering them. He also wasn't establishing a new set of consequences or punishments. I believe that what he was doing was really trying to get our attention by challenging our presuppositions, like what we think of when we think of anger. And we probably think, no big deal. And he was scrambling them up in a way that you hear this, and I hope you kind of lean in and go, what? Jesus saying? I mean, I call someone an idiot and hell is involved? What's going on? Could it be that maybe he's trying to break up some of our preconceived notions so that we'll listen more deeply to what he wants to say to us? Because what he wants us to know, folks, is that in God's economy, anger is equivalent to murder. That's what he says. And the reason this is important, because when interpreting the sixth commandment, the Pharisees and the scribes taught that if you simply didn't murder anyone, you obeyed the law, and therefore you were right with God. And honestly, that would make people feel kind of holy and prideful, since they had perfectly kept God's law. However, in the Old Testament law, properly interpreted, it didn't only focus on outward observances. I mean, the Old Testament law, we know, could be summarized with two basic commands. Anybody remember what they were? Love God and love your neighbor. And so they didn't just prohibit or command certain actions, they also prohibited or commanded certain heart motives. And I think what Jesus wants us to understand is that our anger, and I got to admit it's true, our anger leads to far greater destruction than we ever give it credit for.